The restaurant hummed with the understated buzz of a bustling evening, its polished ambiance alive with the soft strains of classical music weaving through the air. The gentle clink of wine glasses and silverware created a rhythmic backdrop as Alicia Carter sat at her table, perfectly centered in the elegant dining room. A crisp white tablecloth draped her table, the utensils gleaming under the warm glow of chandeliers. Alicia, poised and self-assured, had arrived right on time, as was her custom. Her presence blended effortlessly into the sophisticated setting, exuding a quiet confidence that seemed to anchor the space around her. As the staff glided through the room, ushering new patrons to their seats with practiced grace, Alicia's sharp eyes caught a couple being led to a table near hers. They had strolled in moments ago, clearly without a reservation. Yet they were seated promptly. She made a mental note of it, her lips curving slightly as she returned her attention to the menu. "Everything all right, ma'am?" her waiter asked, pausing to refill her water glass with a courteous smile. "Just fine," Alicia replied warmly. "I'm waiting on my meal. Thank you." Settling back into her chair, she let her gaze wander, soaking in the scene. The other diners, business professionals in tailored suits, couples lost in candlelit conversations, were absorbed in their own worlds. Alicia savored these moments of quiet observation, finding a certain poetry in the ebb and flow of life around her. Near the entrance, the restaurant manager, Michael Turner, stood like a sentinel, his arms crossed tightly over his immaculate suit. His expression was as starched as his attire, stern and unyielding. He tapped his earpiece, his focus narrowing as he listened to a voice on the other end. Whatever he heard made his spine stiffen, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. A server approached him, her brow furrowed with uncertainty. Michael leaned in, his voice a low murmur. "They're on their way." "We need to be ready." His eyes swept the dining room, pausing on Alicia's table. A shadow of a frown crossed his face as he glanced at the reservation list clutched in his hand. With a subtle gesture, he summoned the waiter closer. "Table 7, he said, nodding toward Alicia. "We might need to clear it. Keep it on standby." The waiter hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "But, sir, she's already seated." Michael's hand sliced through the air, cutting him off. "Just do it."
"I'll handle it,
Unaware of the hushed exchange, Alicia smoothed her napkin across her lap and glanced at her phone, the restaurant's lively hum enveloping her. Michael's gaze, however, remained locked on her table, his mind clearly calculating his next move. The evening's calm rhythm carried on, but a storm was brewing just out of Alicia's sight. She traced her finger along the menu, debating between the seared scallops and the herb-crusted lamb. When the waiter returned to Michael's side, "She's still there," he said, casting a nervous glance toward Alicia. Michael's face hardened, his annoyance bubbling to the surface. "Fine, I'll deal with it." Straightening his jacket with a sharp tug, he strode across the dining room, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. Alicia sensed his approach before she saw him. Setting her menu down, she met his gaze with calm curiosity as he stopped at her table. "Good evening," he began, his smile as thin as a razor's edge. "I'm Michael Turner, the manager. I'm afraid we have a situation." Alicia tilted her head, her expression unruffled. "What kind of situation?" Michael clasped his hands in front of him, his tone measured but laced with condescension. "A very important guest will be arriving shortly, and we need to make some adjustments to our seating. Unfortunately, that means I'll need you to vacate this table." Alicia's eyebrow arched, her voice steady. "Vacate? Why, I have a reservation, and I was seated on time." Michael's smile tightened, his patience visibly fraying. "I understand, but this is an exceptional circumstance. I trust you will be understanding about the restaurant's needs." Alicia leaned back in her chair, her composure unshaken but her tone sharpening. "I don't understand. Actually, why not ask someone else to move? There are at least 3 tables that were seated after me." Michael's expression flickered, a flash of irritation breaking through his polished facade. "Ma'am, I'm asking you because this is a business decision. We need to maintain a certain ambiance for tonight's special guests." "Ambiance," Alicia repeated, her voice now carrying a quiet edge. "And my presence ruins that for you." Michael's professionalism slipped further, his tone dropping to a clipped whisper. Look, this isn't personal. I'm offering you a chance to handle this gracefully. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Alicia's eyes narrowed, her posture straightening. Are you threatening me? Michael exhaled sharply, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. I'm simply saying that if you don't cooperate, I'll have to involve security. I'd hate it for things to escalate unnecessarily. Alicia froze for a heartbeat, then smiled a cool, deliberate smile that didn't reach her eyes. Escalate, she said, her voice steady as steel. Michael nodded, his confidence returning. Yes, this doesn't have to be unpleasant. But if you insist on making a scene, I'll act in the best interest of this establishment. Alicia let his words linger in the air, studying him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. Then, with measured calm, she folded her napkin and placed it on the table. I see. So your solution is to intimidate paying customers to accommodate special guests. Is that it? Michael's jaw clenched, his voice dropping even lower. You're not the first person I've had to deal with like this. I can make this as easy or as difficult as you want. Alicia's smile widened, but it was laced with defiance. I think I'll stay right here for now. Michael's nostrils flared, his frustration boiling over. Fine. I'll give you 5 minutes to reconsider before I return with security. He spun on his heel and stormed off, leaving Alicia amidst the faint murmurs of nearby diners who had caught fragments of the tense exchange. Alicia took a deep breath, steadying herself as she glanced toward Michael, now huddled with a pair of staff members, his gestures sharp and his expression taut. She didn't know what he'd do next, but one thing was clear: this was far from over. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table, her thoughts racing beneath her calm exterior. The anger simmering within her was tempered by a lifetime of navigating moments like this. Michael Turner was just another in a long line of people who thought their authority gave them the power to decide who belonged and who didn't. Her gaze drifted to the other patrons. Some were oblivious, lost in their meals and conversations, while others stole curious glances in her direction, their whispers barely audible. Alicia caught fragments of their questions. What was happening? Why was the manager so upset, followed by awkward silence, when they realized she'd noticed them? She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just about her. She could feel it deep in her core. People like Michael didn't stop at one person. How many others had he bullied into silence, forced to leave without a fight? The sharp click of polished shoes snapped her back to the present. Michael was returning, this time flanked by 2 uniformed security guards. His earlier pretense of civility was gone, replaced by a cold, impatient glare. Ma'am, he said sharply, his tone brooking no argument. I warned you about this. Alicia remained seated, her gaze unwavering. Warned me about what? Exactly. Michael folded his arms, his voice dripping with disdain. Your refusal to cooperate. I've asked you politely to vacate this table, and now you're disrupting the restaurant's operations. This is unacceptable. The guards loomed behind him, their presence a silent threat. Alicia felt their eyes on her, waiting for any sign of resistance. And again, she said, her voice calm but unyielding. You haven't explained why it's me you're asking to leave. There are plenty of other diners here, some who arrived after me. Why not them? Michael's lips pressed into a thin line, but then he said it the words Alicia had been bracing for. Because this establishment caters to a certain clientele, and I'm afraid you don't exactly fit the image we're trying to uphold tonight. Alicia's breath caught, the raw truth of his words hanging heavy between them. There it was, stripped of pretense or subtlety. Say that again, she said, her voice low but commanding. Michael's eyes darted around, suddenly aware of the weight of his admission. He shifted uncomfortably but doubled down. We have a responsibility to maintain a high standard here, and frankly, I don't believe you align with that standard. Alicia rose slowly, her movements deliberate, her presence towering despite her stature. The guards tensed, but she made no move to resist. Instead, she smoothed her dress and reached for her bag. You think you can do this, she said softly and almost to herself. Then her voice hardened, enough to make Michael flinch. You think you can treat people like this and get away with it? I've made my position clear, Michael replied stiffly. Now, if you'd kindly step aside, we can resolve this without further issues. Alicia studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a calmness that belied the fire within her, she pulled her phone from her bag. Wait, she said, holding up a finger. Before you have security escort me out, I just need to make a phone call. Michael's brow furrowed, his confidence wavering as she turned slightly away, already dialing. He crossed his arms, his expression a mix of annoyance and disbelief. Go ahead and make your call, he said dismissively, his tone dripping with condescension. I'm sure whoever you're calling will understand the situation perfectly. Alicia didn't respond. She stepped a few paces away, her voice low but firm as she spoke into the phone. Michael shifted his weight, his earlier smugness faltering as he watched her. The guards exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to act or wait. The restaurant's hum seemed to fade, the air thick with anticipation as Alicia's call connected. Her words inaudible, but her resolve unmistakable. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: Michael Turner had underestimated the woman he'd chosen to confront. The restaurant hummed with its usual evening rhythm, a soft clatter of plates and murmured conversations filling the air. But at one table, a storm was brewing. One of the security guards leaned toward Michael, the manager, his voice low but urgent. Should we move her out now, he asked, his eyes flicking toward Alicia, who sat poised, her phone pressed to her ear. Michael's jaw tightened, his gaze sharp as he snapped. Not yet. His tone was clipped, his eyes narrowing as he watched Alicia continue her conversation, undeterred by the tension radiating from him. Let her finish whatever little performance this is. Then we'll deal with it. The nearby tables had fallen quieter, the subtle shift in atmosphere not lost on the other diners. Curious glances darted their way, forks pausing midair as the undercurrent of drama rippled through the room. Alicia ended her call with a deliberate click, slipping her phone into her bag with a calm that seemed to defy the charged air around her. She turned to face Michael, her expression steady, resolute, and utterly unshaken. You're going to regret this, she said, her voice smooth but carrying a weight that made the words land like a warning shot. Michael's eyebrow arched, a flicker of his usual smugness creeping back. Oh, really, he said, his tone dripping with mockery. And why's that, exactly? Alicia didn't flinch. Because I just spoke to the owner of this restaurant, she replied, her words precise, each one striking like a perfectly aimed dart. The statement hit Michael hard, though he masked it with a quick, derisive laugh. The owner? Let me guess he's about to swoop in here like some kind of hero to save the day. His sarcasm was thick, but there was a crack in his confidence, a fleeting shadow that crossed his face. Alicia's gaze remained unwavering. That's exactly what's going to happen. Michael's smirk wavered, just for a heartbeat, before he shook his head. Ma'am, I don't know who you think you were talking to, but I'm in direct contact with the owner. I'd know if he was planning to show up tonight. You're about to find out, Alicia said, her voice calm as she folded her arms, her posture radiating quiet authority. Michael's patience snapped. He turned to the guards, his gesture dismissive. This is absurd. Escort her out. Now. The guards hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. Sir, one of them ventured cautiously, if she really did call the owner. She didn't, Michael cut him off, his glare sharp enough to silence any further doubt. It's a bluff. Do your job. Before the guards could you, Alicia raised a hand, her voice slicing through the tension. If you lay a hand on me, it'll be the last mistake you make in this restaurant. Her words carried a quiet power that made even the burly guards pause, their confidence faltering under her steady gaze. Michael stepped closer, his temper flaring as he lowered his voice to a hiss. Listen, he said, his words laced with venom. I don't care who you think you know. I run this place, and I say you're done here. So either walk out quietly, or I'll have you dragged out. Alicia's eyes didn't waver. You don't run anything. Michael, she said coolly, and if you're so sure of yourself, why don't you stick around for a few more minutes? I promise you'll enjoy what happens next. Michael scoffed, but his bravado was starting to crack. His hands clenched into fists at his sides as he glanced around, noticing the growing number of eyes now fixed on their confrontation. Forcing a tight smile, he turned to the guards. Go stand by the door. I'll handle this myself. The guards retreated reluctantly, leaving Michael and Alicia locked in a tense standoff. Enjoy your little power trip while it lasts, Alicia said softly, her voice carrying a chilling certainty. Because when this is over, you are going to wish you'd thought twice before trying to humiliate me. Michael's jaw tightened, his composure fraying at the edges. You think a phone call is going to change anything? You're just another. He stopped himself, but the venom in his tone was unmistakable. Alicia tilted her head, her eyebrow lifting as she let his unfinished words hang in the air. Go ahead, she said, her voice daring him. Finish that thought. Michael's mouth opened, then snapped shut. His confidence was crumbling, but his pride refused to let him back down. You're wasting my time, he muttered, turning toward the foyer. Before he could take another step, the sharp ring of his phone pierced the air. Michael froze, his hand darting to his pocket. He pulled out the device and glanced at the screen, his face paling as he recognized the number. Alicia's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Go ahead, she said. Answer it. Michael hesitated, his eyes flicking between her and the phone. His fingers hovered over the screen before he finally accepted the call, his voice subdued. Hello. The voice on the other end was firm, commanding, and unmistakably furious. Michael's eyes widened, the color draining from his face as he listened. He turned to Alicia, his mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came. Hold on, he stammered, gripping the phone tightly. Let me explain. Alicia crossed her arms, watching him with quiet satisfaction as he floundered. I told you, she said softly. You're going to regret this. Michael clutched the phone like it was his only lifeline, sweat beading on his forehead as the voice of James Lawson, the restaurant's owner, continued to berate him. His usual arrogance had vanished, replaced by a visible panic that made him look smaller, diminished. Yes, Mr. Lawson, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can explain. Alicia stood a few paces away, her posture relaxed but her gaze unrelenting. The nearby diners watched, their curiosity now tinged with confusion as Michael's demeanor shifted from cocky to desperate. No, sir, it's not what it looks like, he continued, his voice growing frantic. I was just trying to manage the situation. He glanced at Alicia, his words faltering under her calm, piercing stare. I didn't mean for it to come across that way. Michael's free hand gestured wildly, as if he could somehow deflect the force of Lawson's anger. I understand, sir, he said quickly, his words tumbling over each other. I'll fix it right now. He turned to Alicia, his expression a mix of panic and forced contrition. Ma'am, he said, his voice trembling. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Please, let's discuss this. Alicia's eyebrow arched, her tone icy. A misunderstanding? You mean the part where you openly said I don't fit the image of this restaurant? Michael winced, his face twisting in discomfort. I didn't mean it like that, he stuttered. It was poor phrasing, completely unintentional. Alicia's gaze didn't soften. So what exactly did you mean, Michael? His mouth opened, but no words came. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint buzz of James Lawson's voice still on the line. Michael brought the phone back to his ear, desperation seeping into his tone. Mr. Lawson, I swear I can handle this, he said quickly. I'll apologize. I'll make it right. Whatever Lawson said next made Michael flinch, pulling the phone slightly away from his ear as though the words were a physical blow. Of course, sir, he said hurriedly. Right away. He lowered the phone, swallowing hard, and turned back to Alicia, his attempt at a smile weak and unconvincing. Miss Carter, he began, his voice unsteady. I'd like to formally apologize. My actions earlier were inappropriate and unacceptable. I hope you'll allow me to make it up to you. Alicia tilted her head, her expression unyielding. Make it up to me, she said, her voice laced with skepticism. Tell me, Michael, how exactly do you plan to do that? He faltered, grasping for words. I can comp your meal, provide a future reservation, anything you'd like. Her smile was faint, cold, and utterly unyielding. Anything I'd like. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a level that carried the weight of her words directly to him. What I'd like, Michael, is for you to explain why you've been treating customers like this for so long. Do you think I don't know? Michael blinked, the color draining further from his face. I what? No, that's not. Alicia cut him off with a raised hand. Save it. I've heard enough. And something tells me Mr. Lawson has, too. Michael's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, hesitating before answering. Yes, sir, whatever Lawson said left him frozen, his lips moving soundlessly for a moment before he managed a response. Understood. Sir, I'll do exactly as you say. He hung up, his hand trembling, and turned back to Alicia, his voice barely above a whisper. The owner would like to speak with you, he said, offering her the phone. Alicia took it without a word, her expression unreadable. She brought the phone to her ear, her voice steady and composed. James, it's good to hear from you. Michael watched, his composure unraveling further with every second. He could only imagine the conversation unfolding, and judging by the cool satisfaction on Alicia's face, it wasn't going in his favor. When Alicia ended the call and handed the phone back, Michael looked at her like a man awaiting his fate. What did he say, he asked, his voice trembling. Alicia's smile was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. You'll find out soon enough. With an air of unshakable confidence, Alicia handed Michael's phone back and returned to her seat. She smoothed her napkin over her lap, her movements deliberate, exuding a calm that seemed to anchor the room. I believe I'll stay for my meal, she said, her voice steady. After all, I do have a reservation. Michael hesitated, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. Of course, he stammered. I'll ensure everything is perfect. I'm sure you will, Alicia replied, her tone sharp enough to slice through the lingering tension. Michael retreated toward the kitchen, muttering something to the staff as he passed. The security guards, now thoroughly confused, exchanged awkward glances before stepping back to their posts near the entrance. Alicia leaned back slightly, taking a sip of water as she surveyed the room. The restaurant's energy had shifted, the staff moving with a nervous urgency. Though most diners had returned to their conversations, a few still stole glances her way, intrigued by the drama that had unfolded. Before long, a ripple of excitement swept through the room. The restaurant doors swung open, and an A-list celebrity strode in, their presence magnetic, undeniable. Heads turned, conversations faltered, and even the waitstaff paused in their tracks. Alicia watched the commotion with mild interest, her expression unreadable, as the room buzzed with renewed energy. The earlier tension now just a memory in the wake of this new spectacle. In a chic, upscale restaurant bathed in the soft glow of ambient lighting, a celebrity, dressed to the nines in tailored designer threads, swept into the room with an air of effortless confidence. Their entourage buzzed around them, orchestrating seating arrangements with practiced precision, ensuring every detail was perfect. The dining room, filled with the low hum of conversation and clinking glasses, seemed to pause as all eyes subtly tracked the star's entrance. But then, something unexpected broke the rhythm of the evening. The celebrity's gaze landed on a woman seated at a corner table, and their face lit up with a spark of recognition. Ignoring the hovering entourage, they made a beeline for her, their purposeful stride drawing even more curious glances from the room. Hey, they called out, their warm, familiar tone slicing through the restaurant's hushed atmosphere. I had no idea you were in town. Alicia Carter rose from her seat, her polite smile radiating a quiet confidence. It's been a minute, hasn't it, she replied, her voice calm but laced with a hint of amusement. The celebrity gestured toward the empty chair across from her. Mind if I crash your evening? Not at all, Alicia said, motioning for them to sit with a graceful wave of her hand. The restaurant staff, already on edge from the star's arrival, seemed to tense further. Waiters darted about with heightened urgency, their movements almost frantic. Near the kitchen, Michael, the manager, froze mid-step, his face paling as if he'd seen a ghost. His eyes locked on the unfolding scene, and what little color remained in his cheeks drained away entirely. The celebrities settled into the chair, their natural charisma filling the space like a warm glow. So they began, flashing a grin that could light up a room. What's the latest with you? Feels like we haven't caught up in ages. Alicia leaned back, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. Oh, just out for a quiet night, though it's shaping up to be anything but. The celebrity chuckled, glancing around at the bustling dining room. Quiet, this place always has a little drama simmering under the surface. But the food's worth it, right? A waiter approached, his hands trembling slightly as he set down their drinks in plates with exaggerated care. Alicia caught the nervous glance he shot toward Michael, who lingered in the background like a shadow. The two friends slipped into an easy rhythm, their conversation flowing as naturally as old times. Alicia shared updates about her latest business ventures, her words tinged with quiet pride. The celebrity, in turn, regaled her with colorful stories from their recent globe-trotting adventures and high-profile projects. Their effortless camaraderie drew occasional glances from nearby patrons, who couldn't help but be intrigued by the lively exchange. Meanwhile, Michael hovered on the periphery, his earlier confidence replaced by a cocktail of dread and disbelief. His eyes flicked between Alicia and her famous companion, his expression oscillating between panic and a forced mask of neutrality. At one point, the celebrity leaned in closer, their voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Okay, level with me. What's the vibe here? You seem sharper than usual, like you're onto something. Alicia's smile didn't waver, but her eyes glinted with purpose. Let's just say the manager and I had a little disagreement about my reservation. Nothing major, it's been sorted. The celebrity raised an eyebrow, their gaze sliding briefly toward Michael. A disagreement. That guy looks like he's one wrong move from fainting. Alicia let out a soft laugh, her tone light but pointed. Oh, I'm sure he's just having an off night. Their conversation rolled on, lighthearted and unbothered, as they savored their meticulously prepared dishes. Alicia couldn't help but notice the staff's behavior shift. They were now almost overly attentive, refilling glasses the moment they dipped below half and delivering each course with a precision that bordered on performative. It was as if they were scrambling to make up for some earlier misstep. By the time the meal wound down, the restaurant had settled into a fragile semblance of normalcy, though a faint undercurrent of tension lingered in the air. As they stood to leave, the celebrity adjusted their jacket, flashing Alicia one last grin. This was a blast. Let's not wait so long to do it again. Yeah. Deal, Alicia replied, rising with a nod. As they made their way toward the exit, the celebrity paused, their eyes landing on Michael, who stood rigid near the back of the room. Their gaze was cool, almost dismissive. Nice place, they said, their tone flat and devoid of warmth, before stepping out into the night with Alicia at their side. Michael didn't respond. He remained rooted to the spot, his face a portrait of quiet desperation, as the weight of the evening's events began to sink in. The next morning, the restaurant was a different world. Golden sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the polished floors and empty tables in a serene glow. The frenetic energy of the previous night was gone, replaced by an almost eerie calm. Michael Turner sat alone at a corner table, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. His eyes darted toward the entrance as Alicia walked in, accompanied by James Lawson, the restaurant's owner. Michael's posture stiffened, but he quickly averted his gaze, as if hoping to shrink into the background. James's voice was calm but carried an unmistakable authority. Michael, thank you for coming in early. We need to talk about last night. Michael stood as they approached, forcing a shaky smile. Mr. Lawson, Miss Carter, I just want to say how deeply sorry I am. I know I messed up, and I want to apologize to both of you. James gestured for them to sit, his expression more thoughtful than accusatory. Mistakes happen, Michael, he said evenly, but I need to understand exactly what went down and why. Alicia is a valued guest, and what happened last night was unacceptable. Michael's smile faltered, but he nodded vigorously. I take full responsibility. Sir, it was a high-pressure night with the celebrity showing up, and I panicked. I didn't mean any harm. Alicia's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she held her tongue, letting James steer the conversation. His tone remained measured, but his words cut deep. Panic is one thing, Michael, but the way you spoke something about fitting the ambiance, that doesn't sound like panic. That sounds personal. Michael's face flushed crimson. I didn't mean it like that, he stammered. It was just bad wording. I swear it won't happen again. James leaned back, studying him carefully. You've been with us a long time, Michael. This is the first time I've had to address something like this with you. Was it really just a one-off mistake? Alicia's gaze hardened, her patience wearing thin. You believe that, James. James turned to her, his expression conflicted. Everyone deserves a chance to explain. Alicia, if this was a single lapse, we can address it and move on. It wasn't, she said firmly, cutting through the tension. Michael's head snapped toward her, his voice rising with a hint of desperation. That's not true, he blurted, but the conviction in his words was shaky at best. Alicia ignored him, her focus locked on James. This isn't about one bad night. This is about a pattern of behavior you've overlooked because you weren't here to witness it. James's brow furrowed, his chair creaking as he shifted. What are you saying, that Michael's been treating other guests this way? Alicia's voice was steady, unyielding. I'm saying if you talk to your staff, you'll hear stories. And if you ask customers, you'll hear even more. Michael's panic was palpable now, his eyes wide. You don't have any proof, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Alicia's eyes narrowed. Not yet, but I will. James rubbed his temple, clearly torn. Michael's been with us for years. Alicia, I've never had reason to question his professionalism before. That's because people like him are careful, Alicia said, her tone icy. They don't show their true selves to someone they need to impress. They save it for the people they think can't push back. Michael shifted in his seat, his hands clenching into fists. That's not fair, he muttered, but the words lacked strength. Fair, Alicia shot back, her voice sharp. You want to talk about fair, Michael. How fair is it to humiliate paying customers just because they don't match your narrow idea of what this place should be? James raised a hand, his voice firm. Let's keep this civil. Alicia, if you believe there's more to this, I'm willing to dig deeper, but I need more than accusations. I need evidence. You'll have it, Alicia said, her confidence unshaken. James nodded slowly. All right. Michael, you're on probation while we investigate. Stay away from the restaurant until we sort this out. Michael opened his mouth to protest but thought better of it. Yes, sir, he said quietly, his shoulders slumping. James turned to Alicia, his tone serious. If there's a pattern, we'll uncover it. But until we do, I'd appreciate discretion. Alicia's smile was tight, but she nodded. Discretion is my specialty. Later that morning, Alicia began her investigation in earnest, starting with the restaurant's staff. She knew they'd have a front row seat to Michael's behavior and might hold the key to exposing his patterns. Her first stop was the kitchen, where the head chef, a stout man with sharp eyes and a steady demeanor, was overseeing preparations for the lunch rush. Excuse me, Alicia said, stepping into the bustling space. The chef set down a ladle and turned to her. Ms. Carter, he greeted, his tone warm but cautious. I heard about last night. That shouldn't have happened to anyone. Thank you, Alicia said. I need your help. I'm trying to figure out if last night was a one-time thing or part of something bigger. Has Michael ever treated other customers the way he treated me? The chef's face tightened, and he glanced around to ensure they were alone. I've seen things, he said carefully, but no one's ever asked me about it before. Please, Alicia pressed. her voice earnest. "If he's been targeting people, I need to know. This isn't just about me, it's about everyone he's hurt." The chef exhaled heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't like stirring up trouble, but Michael's been particular about who gets the best seats for years. I've heard him tell the host to steer certain people, mostly folks who don't fit his idea of classy, away from prime spots." Alicia's frown deepened. "And no one's reported this?" "Not officially," the chef admitted. "But it's not just customers. Some staff have left because of him. He plays favorites, makes it tough for people he doesn't like to get ahead." "Anyone specific?" Alicia asked. The chef hesitated, then nodded. "There was a young waiter a while back. Great kid, worked his tail off. But Michael kept passing him over for promotions, always with some flimsy excuse. The guy ended up quitting." Alicia thanked him for his honesty and moved on. Over the next few hours, she spoke privately with other employees, and the picture grew clearer with each conversation. A server recounted being instructed to seat minority diners near the kitchen or bar, far from the coveted window tables. A former hostess admitted Michael had pressured her to steer undesirable customers away from high-visibility spots, often using phrases like ambiance or not fitting the vibe. The same words echoed again and again, painting a damning portrait of a man who wielded his authority to exclude and diminish those he deemed unworthy. As Alicia pieced together the stories, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about her experience. It was about a culture of bias that had festered under Michael's watch, unchecked for far too long, and she was determined to bring it to light. By noon, Alicia had pieced together enough accounts to solidify her suspicions, but she knew it wasn't enough to present to James just yet. The staff's stories painted a grim picture, yet she sensed the customers' experiences held the missing threads needed to unravel the full truth. That afternoon, she stepped into James's office at the restaurant, where he sat hunched over his desk, his face etched with worry. He looked up as she entered, his voice heavy. "Find anything?" "More than enough," Alicia replied, placing a thick folder of notes on his desk with a soft thud. "I talked to nearly every staff member. They all had stories about Michael, how he's been abusing his authority, targeting employees and customers alike." James opened the folder, his eyes scanning the pages. His brow creased deeper with every line. "This is worse than I thought," he muttered under his breath. "It's not just a few incidents, it's a pattern." "Exactly," Alicia said, her voice firm but calm. "Michael's been fostering a toxic environment here for years, and it's gone unnoticed. You didn't see it, James, but now you do." James leaned back in his chair, exhaling heavily. "You're right, I trusted Michael to manage this place. And I was wrong, blindly wrong." "You can fix this," Alicia said, her tone softening but resolute. "But what we have here isn't enough." James's eyes narrowed, puzzled. "What do you mean these accounts are damning?" "They are," she agreed, "but the staff isn't the whole story. Customers have been hurt by this too. We need to hear from him. Their experiences will show the full scope of Michael's actions." James rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation settling over him like a storm cloud. "Do you think people will talk? Will they come forward?" "They will," Alicia said with unshakable confidence. "But we have to reach out. Start with recent diners. Your reservation system should have contact info for at least some of them." James nodded, his resolve hardening. "I'll get my team to pull the records. If this is as bad as you say, I'll make it right. Michael's days here are numbered. Alicia, I promise you that." Alicia leaned forward, her gaze steady and piercing. "It's not just about letting him go, James. It's about proving to your staff and your customers that this restaurant can be a place where everyone feels valued, that this won't happen again." James extended his hand, his expression earnest. "I'll do whatever Dion takes." Alicia shook his hand, a faint smile breaking through her determined demeanor. "Good. Let's get to work." The day stretched into a marathon of investigation. Alicia sat up at a small desk in James's office, surrounded by towering stacks of reservation logs and scribbled notes. James's assistant worked alongside her, sorting through contact details for patrons who had dined at the restaurant in recent months. Alicia's first call was to Camille and Brian, a young black couple who had visited 3 weeks earlier. As she explained her purpose, Camille's voice hesitated on the other end. Well, now that you bring it up, Camille began cautiously, we did feel off that night. The hostess seemed flustered when she seated us, and we ended up at a cramped table by the kitchen. It was strange because I noticed better tables ones with views sitting empty when we walked in. Did you say anything? Alicia asked gently. We tried, Camille replied, but the manager, Michael, I think brushed us off, said those tables were reserved and walked away before we could argue. It felt wrong, but we didn't want to make a fuss. Alicia's jaw tightened as she jotted down their story, recognizing the pattern immediately. Thank you for sharing. It means a lot. Her next call was to Mr. Harris, a black businessman who had dined alone. His deep chuckle carried a hint of bitterness as he recalled his experience. Oh, I remember that night. I'd reserved a window table, but when I got there, they stuck me in a corner by the bar. I asked why, and the manager, Michael, said a last-minute booking needed my spot. Did you see who got your table? Alicia asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. I did. Harris said, a white couple who showed up after me. They didn't seem like they had a reservation, but Michael greeted them like old friends. I figured they were some kind of VIPs. How did that make you feel? Alicia pressed. Dismissed, Harris said bluntly. Like I wasn't worth his time. It's not the first time I've dealt with that kind of thing, but it stings every time. One call after another. Alicia heard echoes of the same story, all from black patrons. A pair of sisters described being squeezed into the smallest table in the restaurant, despite arriving early for their reservation. A young professional recounted how Michael had barely acknowledged her when she asked for help with her order. Another couple, who had stopped dining at the restaurant altogether, shared how they'd felt unwelcome on multiple visits. What struck Alicia most was the quiet frustration in their voices, not just at the treatment, but at its subtlety. Michael's behavior was polished enough to skirt outright hostility, yet cold enough to leave them feeling invisible. By late afternoon, Alicia's desk was buried under a growing pile of notes. Her stomach churned with a mix of anger and validation. The stories confirmed what she'd feared. Michael's discrimination had driven countless black patrons away, many of whom had simply chosen to spend their money elsewhere rather than confront the slight. That evening, she returned to James's office, her notebook heavy with new findings. He was on the phone when she arrived, his voice low and tense. As he hung up, he motioned for her to sit. How'd it go? He asked, his eyes weary but curious. Exactly as I expected, Alicia said, setting her notebook on his desk. I spoke with 6 black customers today, and every single one described being treated unfairly by Michael. He's been systematically favoring white patrons while sidelining black diners. James flipped through her notes, his frown deepening. I didn't realize it was this widespread, he muttered. It's worse than I imagined. It's beyond worse, Alicia said, her voice steady but urgent. These are just the people I reached today. Think about how many others had similar experiences but never spoke up. James leaned back, running a hand through his hair. What gets me is how subtle it's been. I've eaten here countless times and never noticed. How does someone pull this off for so long? Because people like Michael are careful, Alicia replied. He uses just enough excuses, reserved tables, last-minute bookings to avoid being called out. But the pattern is clear. He's been doing this for years. James stared at the notes, his expression grim. What did the customers say when you explained why you were calling? They appreciated it. Alicia said, most of them had chalked it up to bad service or a fluke. But when I laid out the bigger picture, they got it. Some even said they'd come back if things changed. James nodded slowly. That's a start. But this isn't just about bringing customers back, is it? No, Alicia said firmly. It's about accountability. Michael built a culture of exclusion that hurt your patrons and your staff. That has to change, top to bottom. James met her gaze, his jaw set. You're right. We can't just fire Michael and call it a day. We need to make sure this never happens again. Alicia gave a small nod, satisfied. Then let's start with transparency. We need to contact more customers, hear their stories, and show them we're taking this seriously. James straightened in his chair, a spark of determination in his eyes. I'll get my team on it tomorrow. We'll pull more records and start reaching out. And you'll hold a staff meeting, Alicia added. Your employees need to know what's happening and what's going to change. Done, James said without hesitation. This restaurant will be better. Alicia, I give you my word. The next morning, the restaurant hummed with a different kind of energy. James had called an all-staff meeting before opening hours, and the dining area buzzed with nervous chatter. Servers, cooks, hosts, and cleaners stood in small groups, trading whispers about the unexpected gathering. Alicia arrived early, taking a seat near the front beside James. She'd spent the previous night reviewing her findings, preparing to lay the truth bare. Her calm exterior hid the fire burning within. This was the moment to set things right. When everyone was assembled, James stepped forward, his face a mask of resolve. He raised a hand, and the room fell silent. Thank you all for being here, he began, his voice steady. As you've probably guessed, this isn't a typical meeting. I called you here because something serious has come to light, something that affects every one of you and our customers. The staff exchanged confused glances, a few shifting uncomfortably. James pressed on. This restaurant has always prided itself on being a place where everyone feels welcome. But I've recently learned that hasn't been true for everyone. There have been too many instances of guests being treated unfairly, and I take full responsibility for letting it happen. Alicia noted the surprised looks rippling through the crowd. Few had expected such a candid admission from their boss. James gestured toward her. Alicia Carter has been working with me to dig into these issues. She's spoken with customers and staff, and what she's found is deeply troubling. I'll let her explain. Alicia stood, her gaze sweeping the room with quiet authority. Thank you, James, she said, stepping forward. Over the past few days, I've talked to employees and several customers who've dined here. What I've uncovered is a clear pattern of discrimination, specifically against Black customers. The room went still. Some staff members stared at the floor, while others looked at Alicia with wide, stunned eyes. For years, she continued, certain guests have been treated as less important. They've been seated in less desirable areas, dismissed when they raised concerns, and made to feel unwelcome in subtle but unmistakable ways. Her words hung in the air, the weight of the truth settling over the room. Alicia's voice remained steady, but her passion was unmistakable. This isn't just about a few bad experiences. It's about a culture that's been allowed to fester. And today, we start changing that. In the heart of the bustling restaurant, a storm was brewing beneath the polished veneer of hospitality. Whispers of discontent had been circulating for months, but it wasn't until Alicia, a resolute server with a sharp eye for justice, stepped forward that the truth began to unravel. Customers, specifically Black patrons, had been quietly ignored, dismissed, or even turned away under flimsy excuses, all in the name of preserving the restaurant's carefully curated ambiance. The staff, gathered in a tense meeting, felt a ripple of unease as Alicia's voice cut through the room with unwavering conviction. A few employees exchanged subtle nods, their silent agreement confirming what they'd long suspected but hadn't dared to voice aloud. This wasn't a series of random oversights. Alicia declared, her tone steady but fierce. This was deliberate, orchestrated by Michael Turner, who abused his authority to enforce his own prejudices. A collective gasp pierced the silence, followed by a swell of murmurs. All eyes turned to Michael, the restaurant's manager, who stood at the back of the room, his face flushed crimson, his jaw tight with defiance. Outrageous, Michael barked, stepping forward with a scowl. You can't just sling accusations like that without evidence. Alicia didn't waver. I have evidence, she countered coolly, her voice like steel. I've collected detailed accounts from customers and staff alike, consistent stories that paint a clear picture of your actions. Shall I read them aloud for everyone? Michael's face deepened to an almost alarming shade of red. He opened his mouth to retort but faltered, his eyes darting nervously around the room. The staff's expressions told a damning story, some glared with barely concealed anger. Others looked on with quiet disappointment. His usual swagger, the charm that had carried him through years of managing the restaurant, was nowhere to be found. I made decisions for the good of this place, Michael said, his tone defensive, almost pleading. That's my job as manager. Your job, Alicia shot back, her voice sharp, was to treat every guest with dignity and fairness. Instead, you wielded your power to exclude anyone who didn't match your narrow idea of ambiance. James, the restaurant's owner, stepped forward, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a rare edge. Michael, this isn't about a single mistake or two. This is a pattern, one that's hurt our guests, tarnished our reputation, and violated everything this restaurant stands for. Michael's eyes widened, a flicker of desperation creeping into his voice. Sir, I've been loyal to this place for years. I didn't mean for things to spiral like this. Please, give me a chance to make it right. James's expression hardened, unyielding. You've had years to make it right, Michael. Instead, you dug in deeper. Effective immediately, your employment here is terminated. The room fell silent, the weight of James's words settling like a heavy fog. Michael stood frozen, his mouth opening as if to protest. But no words came. His usual confidence had crumbled, leaving him exposed. James turned to the staff, his voice softer but resolute. I owe you all an apology. I failed to see what was happening right under my nose. And that stops now. Starting today, we're implementing mandatory training on equity and inclusion. I'm also putting systems in place to ensure no one customer or staff is ever treated unfairly again. As the staff absorbed his words, some nodded in cautious approval, while others whispered quietly among themselves. Alicia felt a spark of hope flicker within her. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. The road to real change would be long, but this was a beginning. After the meeting, James motioned for Alicia to follow him to his office. The morning's revelations still hung heavy in the air, but Alicia's focus remained razor-sharp. Michael had been conspicuously quiet during the confrontation, and she suspected his absence from the center of the storm stemmed more from fear than genuine remorse. He's waiting in my office, James said quietly as they walked down the hallway. I wanted to give him one last chance to explain himself. Honestly, I'm not sure it'll do any good, but I need to hear it. Alicia nodded, her expression grim. He won't admit anything unless he's backed into a corner. And even then, don't expect the full truth. Then we'll corner him, James replied, his voice firm as he opened the office door. Michael was already seated at the far end of the room, his posture stiff and defensive. His usually impeccable suit was slightly wrinkled, and a sheen of nervous sweat glistened on his forehead. He glanced up as they entered, his eyes flicking nervously between James and Alicia, but he remained silent. James took his seat behind the desk, gesturing for Alicia to sit beside him. The room felt suffocating, the tension thick enough to choke on. Michael, James began, his voice calm but unyielding. I called you here because I want to understand what happened. This isn't about saving your job, that ship has sailed. This is about accountability. Michael shifted uncomfortably, his fingers gripping the armrests of his chair. I don't know what to say, he stammered. I made mistakes. The pressure got to me. Alicia's gaze was icy as she leaned forward, her arms crossed. Mistakes, she repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. Is that what you call years of targeting Black customers? Treating them like they were less than? You didn't just buckle under pressure. Michael, you built a system that shut people out based on their race. Michael flinched, his face twisting as he avoided her piercing stare. It wasn't about race, he muttered defensively. I was just trying to protect the restaurant's image. Stop, James interjected, his tone sharp enough to cut through the excuses. We've heard that line before, and it's meaningless. Explain what you meant by protecting the image. Who did you decide didn't belong? Michael hesitated, his eyes dropping to the floor. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Finally, hey, show him. He exhaled heavily, his shoulders slumping. Fine, he muttered. I focused on certain customers, white customers. They fit the look of the place, the kind of clientele that brought in high-paying guests. I thought it was best for the business. Alicia's voice was like a blade as she leaned closer. So you're admitting you treated black customers differently because they didn't fit your look. Do you even hear how vile that sounds? Michael looked up, his face pale, his voice weak. It wasn't personal. It was about the bottom line. Do you realize how disgusting that excuse is, Alicia snapped? You weren't just running a restaurant, you were telling people over and over that they didn't belong. And now you're hiding behind the bottom line like that makes it okay. James leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. Michael, you've betrayed everything this restaurant stands for. I trusted you to uphold our values, and you turned them into a mockery. Michael's voice cracked as he tried to defend himself. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I was helping the restaurant. You thought wrong, James interrupted, his voice rising with barely contained anger. You didn't just hurt customers. You hurt the staff who had to carry out your orders, who had to watch you tear people down because they didn't look the part. And now you sit here acting like this was some clever business strategy. It's despicable. Michael's head dropped into his hands, his breath ragged. For a moment, the room was silent. I don't know what to say, he murmured. Start with the truth, Alicia said, her voice unwavering. You owe that to every person you dismissed, every person you ignored, every person you demeaned. Admit what you did and take responsibility. Michael looked up, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. I targeted black customers because I thought they wouldn't push back, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought if I focused on high-profile white clients, it would elevate the restaurant's image. I didn't think anyone would notice. They noticed, James said coldly, and now you'll face the consequences. Michael nodded weakly, his defiance extinguished. I understand, he whispered. James stood, signaling the end of the meeting. You'll never work here or in this industry again. Leave your keys and go. Michael rose shakily, casting one last glance at Alicia before shuffling out of the room. When the door closed behind him, James turned to Alicia, his face a mix of anger and regret. You were right, he said quietly, about all of it. Now it's time to fix this. Alicia met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. It's a start. The afternoon sun poured through the large windows of James's office, casting a warm glow across the polished wood of his desk. Alicia sat across from him, her notes spread out neatly, a roadmap for the change she knew was necessary. The tension from the earlier confrontation had faded, replaced by a shared sense of purpose. James leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled thoughtfully. Alicia, this restaurant has been my dream for years. I thought I was building a place where everyone could feel at home. Now I see I was blind to what was happening right in front of me. Alicia studied him for a moment, her expression calm but firm. The important thing is that you see it now. But recognizing the problem is just the beginning. What you do next will determine whether this place becomes what you dreamed of or stays tainted by Michael's influence. James nodded, his brow furrowed with determination. I've been thinking about that. Transparency is the first step. I need to be honest with the staff and our customers about what happened and how we're fixing it. But I don't want to stop there. I want real, lasting change. Good, Alicia said, leaning forward. Because that's what it's going to take. Michael wasn't the only issue. He created a culture that let discrimination fester, but that culture didn't come from nowhere. If you're serious about change, you have to rebuild from the ground up. James rubbed his temples, visibly wrestling with the weight of her words. Where do we start? With your staff, Alicia said without hesitation. Hold a training session on equity and inclusion, not some half-hearted seminar to check a box, but something real. Bring in experts who can teach your team to recognize and challenge biases, both their own and others. James nodded, jotting down notes. What else? You need accountability. Alicia continued. Set up anonymous reporting channels so staff can speak up without fear. Implement regular reviews to catch problems early. And you need oversight to make sure no one else abuses their power the way Michael did. That includes you. James, you have to be more present, more involved. James looked at her, a mix of gratitude and resolve in his eyes. You're right, then this is on me to fix, and I'm starting today. As they continued mapping out the path forward, Alicia felt that flicker of hope grow stronger. The restaurant had been shaken to its core, but with hard work and unwavering commitment, it could rise again, not just as a place to dine, but as a beacon of fairness and inclusion. The journey was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, Alicia believed they were on the right path. James slumped in his chair, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him like a heavy fog. You're right, he admitted, his voice low. I've been too detached. I put my faith in Michael to handle things, and that was a mistake, a big one. Alicia, seated across from him, met his gaze with steady conviction. Trust matters, James, but so does keeping a close eye on things. You can pass on tasks, but you can't pass on responsibility. James leaned forward, his jaw set with newfound determination. What about our customers? How do I win back their trust after this mess? Alicia's expression softened, though her tone remained firm. Start with honesty. Reach out to those hurt by Michael's actions. Don't just offer refunds, give them a heartfelt apology. Acknowledge the pain caused. Explain how you're fixing it, and prove you're committed to doing better. James frowned, worry creasing his brow. And the public, if this gets out, it could destroy our reputation. Alicia didn't flinch. The truth always comes out. James, you can't hide from it. Get ahead of the story. Release a statement laying it all bare what happened, what you're doing to make it right, and how you're building a place where everyone feels valued. Own your failures, and show the world you're serious about change. James nodded, his shoulders straightening as resolve took root. I'll do it, all of it. And Alicia, I'd like you to help guide us through this. Your perspective has been a wake-up call, and I don't think we can do this without you. Alicia offered a faint smile, her eyes sharp but kind. I'm glad you see that, James, but my job was to shine a light on the problem. The real work rebuilding, changing, that's on you. I'll consult for a bit to get you started, but the heavy lifting is yours. James's face softened with gratitude. That's more than I could have hoped for. Thank you. Alicia glanced at her notes, then back at him. One more thing. Consider donating some of the restaurant's profits to groups that champion fairness and inclusion. It's not a fix, but it's a meaningful step toward it making amends. James nodded thoughtfully, the idea settling in. I'll make it happen. They sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of their conversation hanging in the air. Then James extended his hand. Thank you, Alicia, for everything. You could have walked away, but you stayed to help us fix this. That means more than I can say. Alicia shook his hand firmly, her voice steady. I did it because it was right for the customers, the staff, and everyone who deserves better. Now it's up to you to follow through. James met her gaze, determination carved into his features. I will. I won't let this place slip back into old habits. As Alicia gathered her notes and stood, she offered a small, encouraging smile. Good. Let's see where this goes. She left the office with a sense of closure, but also a quiet fire burning within her. The fight for fairness was far from over, but this moment felt like a small triumph, a step towards something better. Months later, Alicia stepped into the restaurant, her heels echoing softly against the polished marble floor. The space hummed with life, conversations wove together with the gentle clink of glasses and silverware, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. She paused, taking it all in. The changes were subtle but profound. The lighting seemed softer, the decor more welcoming, the energy unmistakably inclusive. A young black host approached with a bright, genuine smile. Welcome to Lawson's, he said warmly. Do you have a reservation? I do, Alicia replied, giving her name. He checked the list and nodded. Right this way, Ms. Carter. As she followed him through the dining room, Alicia's eyes swept over the scene. Black families and couples sat at prime tables, their laughter blending into the lively hum of the room. In one corner, a group of black professionals raised their glasses in a cheerful toast. Near the window, a well-known black actor sat with friends, relaxed and at ease, just another guest enjoying the evening. The sight made Alicia's heart lift. This was no longer a place where anyone felt like an outsider. The host led her to a table where James was already seated. He stood as she approached, his smile warm and genuine. "Alicia, it's great to see you." She shook his outstretched hand and sat down. "Good to see you, too. James." He gestured around the room. "What do you think?" Alicia took a moment, her gaze lingering on the vibrant scene. "It's different," she said at last. "Better? Much better." James chuckled, a hint of relief in his voice. "It's been a journey, that's for sure. But we're getting there. Thanks to you." Alicia folded her hands on the table, curious. "How are the changes holding up?" James's eyes lit up. "Stronger than I hoped. The staff training sessions were a game changer. Everyone's on board. We've also set up an oversight committee to address any issues. And I'm more hands-on now. It's made a world of difference." "And the customers?" Alicia asked. James's smile widened. "We're seeing a real shift. People who stopped coming are back, and new faces are showing up thanks to word of mouth. The reputation's improving, but more importantly, people feel welcome here. This place is starting to live up to what I always wanted it to be, a space for everyone." Alicia glanced toward the window, her eyes settling on the actor and his friends. "It's good to see this place thriving," she said. "But more than that, it's good to see it becoming what you promised, a place where everyone belongs." James nodded, his expression solemn. "It wasn't easy. We had to earn back trust one step at a time, and there's still work to do. But moments like this," he gestured to the bustling room, "they remind me why we push through." As they talked, a server approached, a young woman with a warm smile and attentive demeanor. She treated Alicia with the same professionalism and kindness she offered every table, a small but powerful sign that the culture had truly shifted. When their meals arrived, James raised his glass. "To you, Alicia," he said earnestly, "for holding me accountable, for pushing me to do better, and for opening my eyes to what I couldn't see. I'll always be grateful." Alicia lifted her glass, a quiet smile playing on her lips. "To progress," she said simply, "and to making sure it lasts." They clinked glasses, and for a moment, the weight of the past months seemed to lift. As they dined, Alicia watched the room with a sense of pride. This wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a living testament to accountability and the power of change. The journey wasn't over, but tonight was proof that even small victories could spark something extraordinary. When Alicia stepped outside into the crisp evening air, she glanced back at the restaurant's glowing windows. The people inside, the staff, the customers, the community they were building filled her with renewed purpose. Change was never easy, but it was worth fighting for. As she walked to her car, the lights of Lawson's faded into the distance, but the hope they represented burned bright. The following week, Alicia sat in a cozy office downtown, the walls lined with books on leadership and equity. Across from her was an older black woman with a warm smile and a sharp, knowing gaze. "I heard about the changes at Lawson's," the woman said, leaning back in her chair. "You've done something remarkable there." Alicia smiled modestly. "It wasn't just me. James was willing to listen and act. That's what made it possible." The woman nodded thoughtfully. "It's rare to find someone in his position who will take full responsibility, but it sounds like you didn't give him much choice." Alicia laughed softly. "I can be persuasive when I need to be." The woman's smile widened. "We need more of that. There are plenty of places out there like Lawson's used to be, where bias hides behind polite smiles and excuses. Have you thought about doing this kind of work, full-time consulting? Maybe?" Alicia hesitated. The idea had flickered in her mind, but she hadn't fully embraced it. "I've thought about it," she admitted, "but I'm not sure I'm ready to dive in completely." The woman leaned forward, sliding a business card across the desk. "If you ever are, give me a call. We could use someone with your fire and clarity." Alicia took the card, tucking it into her bag. "Thank you, I'll keep it in mind." That evening, Alicia sat in her apartment, a steaming mug of tea warming her hands. The city lights twinkled outside, casting soft shadows across the room. Her thoughts drifted back to Lawson's to James, the staff, the customers, and the small but meaningful changes they'd built together. It wasn't perfect, and there would always be more battles to fight, but for now, she let herself savor the moment. Her phone buzzed on the table, a text from James lighting up the screen. Just wanted to thank you again for everything. Couldn't have done it without you. Hope you'll visit soon. Alicia smiled, setting her tea down to reply. You're welcome. Keep up the good work. Don't let it slip. I'll be back. She leaned back on the couch, her smile lingering. For the first time in months, she felt a deep sense of peace, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd walked into Lawson's and left feeling seen, valued, and respected. Change was slow, often painful, but tonight it felt within reach.